G'day, I'm Pete, the Aussie Bush Cop. In 2012 I retired from the New South Wales Police and moved to beautiful King Island, where I became a homesteader. And I'd like to share with you stories of crime and criminals from the New South Wales bush. G'day everybody, thanks so much for joining me again. The story that I have for you today is about knocking on doors. And I reckon that in the course of my career I probably knocked on more doors than a Jehovah's Witness and a Mormon combined. And no disrespect to either of those people, but we knock on lots and lots of doors. And there's even a thing called the policeman's knock. And when I knock on someone's door now, I try and not knock like a policeman. Anyway, so this particular day, I was performing duties and I was given a job. I can't remember what the job was, and I was in a complex of units. And so I went to what I thought was the right door, knocked on the door, and this older lady, and now that I'm older myself, she's probably about the age I am now. I've got to that point in life where I'm one of those old people. Anyway, I knocked on this door and the lady comes to the door and she wasn't expecting me because I knocked on the wrong door. And I told her, what I was there for, and she said, no, that's not me. But then, almost immediately, she went into this story about this horrible story that was happening to her. And she asked me why I was there. And I told her, and quite clearly I had the wrong address. But then she told me this story, this horrible story that was actually happening to her at the time. And what it involved was she had somehow or other been tricked into signing over her car. And in Australia, to do that, you need to sign registration papers and you're handing the ownership over to another person. But also, relatives of hers were taking money out of her account. Now, this lady wasn't rich. I could tell from where she lived, the way she dressed, but she was a lovely lady, and I guess that's beside the point. It doesn't matter whether she was lovely or not. What was happening to her was really wrong. And so I took an immediate interest in it. And so she gave me permission to look at her banking records. So I went with that in hand, I went to the bank and I was able to get her banking records, which showed regular deductions from her account by people that weren't her. And I then it took probably a couple of hours to put this information together and to commence the investigation. I then went and briefed a detective inspector about what was happening, and he commended me. He said, Peter, that's really good that you've initiated an investigation. He said, but there's a problem, and the problem was the lady had signed documents giving these people permission to do what they were doing. So clearly it wasn't illegal, it was just plain immoral. And I have what you would probably call a godly rage or a godly anger about that. A righteous anger, I think, is the expression people use. I was righteously angry about what was happening to her. And so in the end, I used some bluff. And now you can feel free to criticise me about what I'm about to tell you, but I really don't care. I went round to the people who was committing these indecent acts against her, and they were relatives, much younger relatives. And I told them that I was investigating it, and I guess that part was true. And I left them with the impression that the investigation was not over, when in fact it was, because I couldn't do anything. But I just hoped that they would spend the next few weeks or whatever it might be when they saw a police car driving past their house or driving past them in the street, because where these people lived was not in the nice part of town. I can tell you that much. in might say, the nefarious section of this particular rural city. And that's as much as I could do. And but then, sometimes you can only do what you can do. And fortunately, I guess the fortunate part is that this lady, let's call her the victim, she at least had a policeman take an interest in her problem. Even though I couldn't fix it, I believe that I was probably able to stop any further deductions from her account. Another story that's sort of similar, or not similar, but involves someone that was difficult to prosecute. We went to a shopping complex where a lady who worked in a particular shop within this complex, because she'd noticed that someone had taken money out of her account, by looking at her banking records. And she then realised that her debit card or her credit card was missing. And so she rang us, and we went round, and we went to the bank, to the ATM, and looked at because ATMs have video camera surveillance in them. And I'm not sure if I had to get a search warrant or not. I don't really remember that part, but I was able to get to access the video surveillance from the ATM, and it showed a young boy, and I mean young, probably about maybe 8 or 10 years old, and he was with his mother, and they were taking money out of her account. I then was able to investigate it further and found that what had happened, where this lady worked in this shop within the complex, that not far from where out the front of her shop was another ATM. And what I was able to learn was that this young boy, who looked quite innocent, was able to stand back and watch her put in her PIN number. And he was able to remember that. And then he subsequently went into her shop and into a private area of her shop where she kept her handbag, and removed her debit card or her credit card from her purse. And then went round to another ATM and steal money from her account. We were able to, that was enough to go and make an arrest of the mother. We couldn't arrest the boy because he was just too young. There's a thing called in Latin called dolly incapax, which is Latin for and you have to have a certain age where police can charge someone, and that has changed over the years. It used to be as low as 9, between the ages of 9 and maybe 14. The police had to prove, and this is the word the law uses, that it wasn't the boy or the child just being naughty. It uses that word naughty because between those ages, you really can't, or the police have to prove that it was the person had a criminal mind as opposed to just being naughty. And this kid just wasn't old enough to do that. But the mother was using him to commit these rather immoral acts. Let's call them immoral, as opposed to criminal. But I was able to charge the mother with a criminal act in that she was using him to commit the offences. She was the mastermind, if you like. And then the final story for you this morning has also a criminal aspect or a legislation aspect to it. In New South Wales, there's an offence, a bunch of offences called under the Summary Offences Act. And a summary offence is that you can't go to jail for it. There's only at best a monetary fine. And we were under instructions from courts not to take people into custody for a summary offence. There were exceptions to that, and one of them was if you don't know who it is, or the person won't tell you who they are at the time of apprehending them. Then you have the power to take them into custody, and by whatever means, and generally that was taking their fingerprints, or by other means, they just tell you who they are. But on this particular night I had not long transferred from Dubbo, which was a 24-hour station, to a one-man station. I was performing duties in this particular town one night, and my off-sider for that shift was a probationary constable, and we're patrolling the residential part of this town, and this fellow gave us committed a summary offence. We stopped, mate, what's your name? Wouldn't tell us his name. And so we then had to take him into custody. And he was a well-built young man, quite muscular. And as we took hold of him and we're putting him into the cage, he was struggling, you might say strenuously, about being put into the cage, pushing backwards to the point, I think it might have been my left shoulder dislocated. And that was not a good feeling. It looked even worse. Suddenly my shoulder is not where it should be. It's decidedly behind where it should be. I don't know how. I'd never dislocated a shoulder before or since. I managed to get it back into its right spot, and we finished the arrest and put him in. And so that's just something. And I remember thinking that night, wow, that's what happens, because ordinarily we would have called for urgent assistance, but in this particular town where we were, urgent assistance was about 40 minutes away. And so I remember thinking, you've got to think differently in these places. So we, anyway, I managed to, there was no ongoing issues with my shoulder, and we prosecuted him, and, I don't even think that the bloke that we're arresting even knew that had happened. But I'll tell you one final story, and it's a similar thing. We were working in the main street of this town on this particular night. This town had a reputation for being having lots of drunken fools, in the later hours of Friday and Saturday night. And there was a lady who we were patrolling the town, and there was this lady who was committing a summary offence. And I didn't know who she was. My partner didn't know who she was. My partner for this particular shift was a sergeant, and he hadn't long transferred there. And I was putting my hand surreptitiously into the handle to undo the door to run at this woman and to run her down. And she was full of cheek and bad manners and mouthing off, and there was a whole bunch of people egging her on. And I was sitting there really blank, like I put on my best poker face. And she continued to do that. This particular street was quite wide too, I might add. We were on one side and she was on the other. She was actually sitting in the gutter on the other side of the street. The moment came where I sprang and I opened up the door and I just sprinted hard at her. By about this stage, I was probably in my mid-40s, and I just ran at her hard, and of course, as soon as the door opened, she bolted and she's running away, being egged on by even more and more by onlookers. The trouble was, she had long flowing hair, and as I ran and I was gaining on her, and I was able to grab hold of her and then march her towards the back of the waiting police truck. And when she was still mouthing off and full of cheek and bad manners, and we put her into the truck and took her back to the station, and she went back there, and then we dealt with her as quickly as we could, and then let her go. And she went back to the street, and she again committed the same offence or something very similar. And there was another crew working that particular night, and they apprehended her again and brought her back to the station. You'd think you'd learn, but no, she didn't. Anyway, that's enough for today, and we'll see you next time.